Welcome back to the Daily Bible Breakdown. Today we're covering Numbers chapters 22 through 24. And in these chapters we read a portion of the story of the prophet Balaam. As we read the account, we find that Balak, the king of Moab, was concerned about the people of Israel as he looked out and saw the vast number of people camping just outside of his land. Apparently, though, there was no reason for him to fear them, because as far as we can tell, there was no plan for them to be driven out. They were not among the list of nations that were to be overtaken in the conquest of Canaan. Nevertheless, he had heard of their exploits among the nations that opposed them on their way to that point, and he decided that some action needed to be taken to spare himself and his people. And so he called Balaam. Balaam was a pagan prophet who apparently had a reputation for being able to pronounce blessings and curses upon people. And so he asked Balaam to come and curse the people of Israel so that they would be weakened enough for his armies to defeat them. So he sent princes, messengers to Balaam to invite him to come, but he delayed until he could consult with the God of Israel. Interestingly enough, God spoke to Balaam. Now, that's not entirely unusual for God to speak to pagan leaders for his purposes. We know he's appeared in dreams and visions to other pagan kings whenever it was necessary. But God spoke to Balaam nonetheless and told him not to go and not to curse his people. So Balaam told the messengers that he was forbidden to go. They were then sent back with additional money and incentive, but Balaam refused again. That's when God told him that if they asked him again to go, that he could, but he would not be permitted to curse the people. The next morning, Balaam got on his donkey and rode toward Moab with those messengers. And the Bible tells us that God was angry with him. And that's interesting because we read that he had just told him to go. So apparently God's anger was not at his going, but at his motives for going, which are not necessarily revealed here, but as we read about him in other places, it's evident that he was going so that he could gain money for somehow fulfilling the wishes of the king of Moab. Along the way, God sends the angel of the Lord to stand in front of his path. And the donkey sees the angel of the Lord with a sword drawn, and so he stops. And so Balaam strikes the donkey. And the donkey then turns into a wall, crushing Balaam's foot, and then ultimately lays down under him, refusing to go any further. In response to Balaam striking him once again, the donkey's mouth was supernaturally opened so that he could speak to Balaam and ask him why he continued to hit him. It's also interesting to note that Balaam was not surprised by hearing the donkey speak, probably indicating that he was involved in some kind of demonic or pagan cult in which he was used to hearing animals speak in some way or another. Anyway, the Lord finally allowed him to see the angel of the Lord that stood in his path, and he knew that he had made a mistake by trying to push the donkey to go forward. Once again, he's told that he could go along, but he would not speak anything except the words the Lord gave him to speak. Balaam finally arrives in Moab with Balak. He's taken to the high places of Baal and shown a portion of the people of Israel camped on the outskirts of their land, and he's asked to curse them. But instead, he speaks words of blessing over them that the Lord had given him to speak. And this angers Balak, and so he makes another attempt to get him to curse the people. This happens 4 times total. Instead of cursing the people, he blessed them. In his last oracle, actually, he even prophesies the fate of other nations that opposed Israel. After this, they went their separate ways, and Balaam did not get paid. We're going to see how this story continues in the next episode.